Balake. Where is Balake at?
My name's Blake.
Do you want to go to war, Balake? I'm for real. Ron.
Ron is present. Thanks for joining me, everyone, for another installment of SPTV. Today, I have something very special, an interview that I did with Geoff Levin. Back in 1968, Geoff Levin and his brother Robbie were in a band called People. They had a hit song that charted at number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100. They appeared on American Bandstand with Dick Clark. Not long after, Geoff and Robbie got into Scientology, and it was all downhill from there. Scientology was the root cause of the breakup of the band and also the breakup of the two brothers through Scientology's policy of disconnection once Robbie left Scientology. Many decades later, when Geoff himself left Scientology, the brothers reunited, as did the band. The remarkable story is now being told in a documentary called Brothers Broken, which is being featured at the Cinequest Film Festival. The documentary is available for viewing online, but only for 3 more days, only through Sunday, March 12th. I'm going to post a link in the description down below, as well as in the comments for anybody who would like to view that online. I watched it myself. It's absolutely fantastic. I had an opportunity to chat with Geoff about the documentary itself and to pick his brain a little bit more about his experience in Scientology. So without any further ado, here is my chat with Geoff Levin. Okay, good. And we're live. Geoff Levin, I'm so happy to have you on. Thanks for joining me.
My pleasure.
So you and your brother have just produced a documentary called Brothers Broken. And I watched it and it was incredible. And it made me embarrassed that I didn't already know more of your story. For a lot of my time in Scientology, people have always been asking me if I was related to you. And but because I wasn't in that celebrity center world, I was always like, who is this guy that people keep asking me if I'm related to? And then even when you came out of Scientology and your story started circulating publicly, I was still like, who is this guy? I feel like I don't get it. And so I got to tell you, I've heard some stories here. I've heard some stories there. I've seen stuff that you've published. Seeing this documentary connected all of the dots for me. I absolutely loved it. What are you guys doing with this documentary?
Well, we're taking the festival route, which means the producers don't really have any direct contacts to like Netflix or Hulu or Paramount or one of those streaming things. So we're going the festival route, and I've entered it in a few festivals. This is the first credible festival that we have been in. I've been in some smaller ones. This one is very together, and I didn't even know it was that well known until other film people said, "Oh, you're in Cinequest." So that was, for me, the platform where we could actually go out to the public, and that's what we've done. Cinequest has a virtual reality festival right now going on till Sunday. And then the exciting thing is there'll be a live festival in August, which people are invited to. And what blew me away, and I don't believe in coincidences, what blew me away was it's in my hometown. An established festival in my hometown. I didn't know about it. And so I get to go back to San Jose, and we have all kinds of people and fans from our 1960s days who I hope will fill the theater.
So Geoff, I mean, for those who don't know, I mean, you and your brother and your bandmates were inducted into the San Jose Rock Hall of Fame, yes?
Yes. And that was fun. It was also, I'll tell you a story that, well, my brother tells it in the film a little bit. But from my side, it was really weird, because I was in Scientology and I was not going to talk to him, even though we might show up for the award ceremony, the San Jose Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We might show up together. We couldn't really play together. I mean, how does that work?
Yeah.
You're supposed to play live. And so my brother took it upon himself to fake that he was going to try to get back in good graces of Scientology.
That part of the story really blew me away. Like, he talk about being the bigger man. I mean, oh my God. So like for the viewers who may not know, so you and your brother, you were in the band called People.
Right.
You and your brother had both joined Scientology, but at some point he left Scientology and you disconnected from him. You're disconnected for decades. You're
Yes.
getting inducted to the Rock Hall of Fame. And your biggest problem is, how do we perform when I'm not allowed to talk to my brother? So your brother pretends to be interested in getting back in Scientology so that you'd be allowed to talk to him so that you guys can perform together at the induction ceremony.
And that's what happened.
Right.
It was, I was still a little bit, he got permission from the International Justice Chief. This is the highest ethics person in Scientology. And so that was okay. And the others, the keyboard player, Albert Ribisi, was also hardcore at the time. So both of us, and Albert was close friends with Robbie. I met Albert through Robbie because they went to school together. We're talking about 14 or 15, right?
Is Al Ribisi Giovanni Ribisi's father?
Yes, he is. And I know all of them. I know the stories. I know. And so anyway, Albert and I were really like skeptical but we were happy that Robbie was making the effort, and he did. He really went an extra mile to really show that he was trying to get back in. He bought 50 million Way to Happiness books. I'm joking, but and he sent them out to all his clients, and whatever you know what you have to do in order to get back in. So he was doing it. So we all got together. It was still surreal. That's all I can say. It was still so weird.
So you're going back to your hometown for this
yes.
film festival.
Yeah. But this time I think Robbie will be there. Well, everybody will be there. I think it's a huge celebration, both of the band, of our efforts to make the film, and San Jose, which was we just grew up there, and there was a lot of positive things to say about it, about the city.
Amazing. That's amazing. Somebody asked me on a live stream yesterday, why did so many Scientology organizations spring up in the Bay Area? And I came up with an answer that I thought sounded good, but what do you think is the reason for that?
Well, I want your answer first.
I said, look, it was a bunch of rich, dirty hippies with nothing better to do. I was sort of kidding. But I said, look, there's no magic recipe. You have to have enough people who have the time and the interest and the wherewithal. And it just so happened that LA and the Bay Area, you had sort of a perfect mixture of those ingredients. That just to me is common sense. There's no extra rhyme or reason for why Scientology springs up in an area. You have to have the people who have the interest and the time and the money. Was I far off?
No, I think that's one of the aspects. I think the biggest aspect is that you've got a bunch of eggheads in the Bay Area. A lot of really intelligent people, sensitive people who were, you had Stanford. I mean, and then you had one of the guys that was good friends with Jerry Garcia is the guy who turned me on to Scientology in 1963. I didn't really make any contact with it till 68. My musical mentor was a guy named David Nelson. He was in the New Riders of the Purple Sage, and he's still playing. And he turned me on to Scientology. And there was another guy with him who was a big Scientologist at the time. So they told me about the concept of the spirit that Hubbard calls a thetan that's immortal. And this is in 1963 as they're handing me a joint.
I keep telling people Scientology was a different beast back then.
Totally.
So has he since apologized for introducing you to Scientology?
He laughed about it because I called him up when I got out of Scientology I called him up and he took my call and everything, and we talked a lot. And when I told him what happened, he just laughed.
Wow.
He's a good guy, great musician, David. And so that was my first introduction to it, and they explained it enough. And then Raymond Kemp, do you know who he is?
I don't.
Raymond Kemp was the opinion leader guy for Scientology. He was kind of brought it down to an understandable level. You didn't have to read Dianetics, you could read Ray Kemp's book.
Oh.
So they gave me the book, and I started to read it. And so it explained the thing about the Thetan.
What was he like? Was he like a big mission holder or something?
Yes, I think so.
Oh.
He was a big mucky muck.
Hmm.
And so that was my first introduction. And then I didn't get in because I got too busy with music and stuff like that.
Hmm.
So but I never forgot what I learned though about the Thetan, and I took that on as my belief. Okay, I'm immortal. I have these powers, and that was big in Scientology in the 60s. You know, you're going to get these powers of being able to go outside your body with full perceptions and telepathy, all of that stuff. But anyway, to answer your question, well, I think I answered the question. I think it's about the amount of egghead, really smart, sensitive people who wanted to go. They didn't want organized religion. And at the time, it didn't come off as being an organized religion. They wanted something scientific, something that made sense, and Dianetics seemed to do that.
Right. So let me ask you this. When your brother left Scientology, had Scientology as an organization already developed to the point where they were enforcing upon you that you had to disconnect, or did you just do it out of a sense of what you thought was right?
At the time, well, there's a story that's not in the movie they got to tell you about my brother.
Okay.
When Miscavige took over, right? Or he was about to taking over. At the time, it was him and Ray Midoff and what's his name?
Mark Yeager.
Mark Yeager, but there's one more person who was the captain of the ship at one time, the Apollo. I just can't remember.
Not Bill Robertson.
No, not Bill Robinson, the other guy with the mustache.
Oh, Norman Starkey.
Norman Starkey. So they are all together at that time, including Miscavige, and they were coming out as the new execs, the new executive group. This was probably around 1982, maybe. Okay. My brother was, at the time, he had a very successful clothing company. He was making buco bucks. So he was on Scientology's radar big time. He was already disaffected, but he wasn't letting me know or anybody else, right? And he had brought this executive. Now her name is Vicki Lewis or Vicki Spear, the woman that you said was blocked out. Anyway.
Oh, that was her.
Yeah.
She's in the documentary.
Yeah, Vicki Lewis.
Okay.
Or Vicki Spear.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not what the public is seeing, and I'm not sure how you got that one, but anyway. So Vicki was in touch with all these executives that were leaving.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
She didn't. That's not the same person that I know as Vicky Asnaran, is it?
No. This is different.
Okay. Go ahead.
So, anyway, so my brother decided I think either volunteered or somebody. He had a beautiful house in near Chatsworth, gorgeous, off of Mulholland Drive, which was just hills and amazing mansion type. So somebody contacted him and said, can we do an event at your place? And he said, sure, no problem. He already had Kima Dunleavy. Do you know who she is?
No.
She was Hubbard's nurse.
Okay.
So she was in on everything. So she had left. She finally realized, boy, I'm going to get my head chopped off if I don't leave. So she left, but she had nowhere to go. And so she went to Vicky, and then she stayed at my brother's place, unbeknownst to me.
Mm.
So my brother they were staying up late at night because we were all friends. Kima and me and Robbie were friends from way back, the 60s. And she started telling Robbie the whole truth about Hubbard. So he knew all this stuff. He wasn't telling me anything. So he has this event, and I'm there performing with Larry McNeely and Jeffrey Lewis from the Celestial Navigations, and all these other celebs are showing up because my brother is very friendly with all the celebrities and stuff. And he gets Miscavige in a room by himself.
Oh my God.
And he starts asking him these questions that he knew the answers to.
Oh my God.
And Miscavige just lied through his teeth. And my brother was getting more pissed and more pissed, but he can be very cool. He knows how to be and he never let on anything. It was just like, cool, well, that's great. Thanks, David. Thanks for telling me all that stuff.
Wow.
So he knew all that. So at that point, he was like, okay, I got to get Geoff out of this. So he brought me over, sat me down. He didn't tell me all the things he knew. And at the time I was watching him, and he seemed like he wasn't this is early 80s. He wasn't interested anymore in science. He'd been to Flag, he'd done knots, and he wasn't interested so much. So I was going, what's going on here? And then he finally spilled the beans and said, this Hubbard's a scam artist. And he started rolling this stuff off. I knew some stuff about my brother at the time that I felt was unethical. Turns out it wasn't, but at the time I thought it was. So I thought, okay, that whole mechanism, okay, if you have crimes against something, then you will be hypercritical of that person, thing, organization. So I thought that's what was going on. So I just tuned him out. I said, I'm sorry, I don't agree with this. And that was it. And so I made the decision. Now I was getting auditing too at in Los Angeles at the advanced organization there. And so eventually but I didn't disconnect, and I was still talking to him a little. And they said, okay, you want to continue your auditing, you need to talk to your brother.
Was that coming down from David Miscavige?
No, I wasn't on his radar.
Okay.
He knew who I was, but I wasn't. I consider at the time I was like a C-grade celebrity. And that's something I'd like to maybe mention, of the way they grade you. They don't say it, but the way they grade you at Celebrity Center. So anyway, I got, at the time, this was the 80s, I didn't have a cell phone. I got on the payphone at the AOLA, put my quarters in or whatever I did, called my brother. He answered, and I said, I have to disconnect from you. I want to get my auditing. And so I'm sorry, but I cannot communicate with you or talk with you anymore. And that's how I disconnected from him. Wow. On the payphone at AOLA.
Wow. But how did they know to tell you that in order to keep moving on your auditing, you had to talk to or disconnect from your brother? Is it because you had mentioned that he had said some of these things to you?
He had done a newspaper article in Tampa Bay, the Tampa Bay Times.
Wow.
So he'd had that article, and that was it. And he was clearly out. They didn't want him to leave. In fact, they jumped through hoops to try to get him back in. They sent a Knots auditor, one of the highest trained, most successful Knots auditors from Flag, to go out to his home and audit him. And
wow.
And he was really friendly with this auditor. I mean, they were really tight. And that was their final attempt. And of course, he just wasn't buying it by that point.
Wow. So in the documentary, you do say that he sat down and tried to basically tell you some things to sort of get you out. And you said, no, I can't. You weren't willing to hear it at that time. But what you didn't mention in the documentary is that was information that he was getting from L. Ron Hubbard's personal nurse, who had left Scientology and was living in his home, spilling all the dirt.
Yep. And then he got to confront David Miscavige with that, knowing that he was lying.
Was he basically testing Miscavige to see if Miscavige would just lie?
Well, he didn't know who he was, so he wanted to see, okay, what kind of guy is he? He hadn't quite decided to leave yet. And so he wanted to see, is this a straight up guy, or is he completely, full of, dog poo-poo?
Wow.
And so at that point, he wasn't going in there with a complete negative attitude. He was going in there with, I have questions and give me the answers.
Incredible.
And then Miscavige,
I mean, your brother in the documentary just, I found him to be so impressive. I found it remarkable that he's the brother who left Scientology. And while Scientology eventually preyed upon you, preyed upon your money, preyed upon your soul, he thrived and flourished and prospered outside in the real world. Meanwhile, Scientology was destroying your world, and you were a committed believer. I mean, the juxtaposition of the two is really startling.
I think the thing is that he was in it for really only dedicated for a few years. When he was super dedicated though. And then what happened is he got busy. And for him, being busy was more important than saving the world. And that was his thing. And he had a band that he got a few of the people into Scientology, called Rockin' Horse. Really, he was more focused on his success. That was first.
Yeah.
And so he very quickly kind of just became arm's distance from Scientology. And then at the time, I mean, the orgs were pretty run down at that time. They weren't particularly nice. So, and he was now hanging with these very successful people. So that was his standard.
Yeah.
And but yeah, he didn't suffer.
Right.
I went through I was to explain, I think you've explained potential trouble source to people.
Yeah, in various videos, but there's always new viewers,
Yeah. So that's when, for whatever reason, you're kind of have this roller coaster kind of life. And sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. And passive aggressive is one term that's used. Anyway, I was constantly roller coastering in Scientology, and they always gave the answer that either something I was doing that was unethical, or it was something that I needed to do the next level.
Right.
And I always believed that.
Mm.
And so I would start to get to the edge of success and then crash. Then I do something else and crash. And that just went on until I did the big crash, which is in the movie, which you got
Right.
to see.
Right.
So, but what was my point?
Oh, that's okay.
Yeah, you can edit it out.
Well, no. I had mentioned the fact that it was sort of
Right.
ironic that your brother flourished outside of Scientology. Meanwhile, you're the most dedicated one. They're taking everything from you. He's free from those, that pressure, that burden, and he's flourishing out there in the real world. Quick question.
Yeah.
Did you guys in those early days of Scientology, did you know the Feschbach brothers?
I knew him a little.
Okay.
That wasn't early for me by that time.
Right. They might have not gotten in until what, the 80s?
Yeah. And I think my partner at the time, Chris Maney, who was married to Nancy Maney, he was friendlier with them, and he got us to invest a tiny bit of money with them, but very little. And I think we took it out before we lost it. And so I knew them vaguely, and because I don't really mention this in the film, I was constantly on stage at events performing with one person or another. So pretty much a lot of people knew me, so I could approach them and they weren't put off, if that makes sense. So I had met them. Fortunately, I didn't invest very much.
I mean, I'll tell you why I even asked the question is because I just found out in the last week or two that there's a fourth Feschbach brother I've never heard about.
Yeah, I saw that.
And it turns out he's the oldest of the four. He's the healthiest, he's the wealthiest, and he's the one brother who didn't get sucked into Scientology. I mean, Joe died young, Matt declared bankruptcy, Kurt doesn't have enough money to be able to retire, and Dan Feschbach is almost a billionaire, I'm told.
Oh, good for him.
he invests in companies that are founded and co-founded by people with autism. His son has autism.
Wow.
He's been an advocate for autistic causes. So he's actually doing good in the world, and he's rich as hell, and he's healthy as an ox. And his other three brothers are the ones that got, essentially destroyed and by Scientology. I mean, those are my words.
Yeah, and they took a lot of people with them.
Exactly.
So
let me ask you, there's a point in the documentary where, and it's a really touching, like, emotional moment in the documentary where you basically tell your brother you're I'm not giving anything away.
Okay.
I'm giving anything, but that you see is part of you continuing to make amends for having helped Scientology grow, having built up the Celebrity Center, having helped this organization,
right?
And that this documentary is a part of that.
Yes. Yeah. For me, I feel like when I got out of Scientology, I very quickly understood and was helped to understand that I had been a cultaholic. And just as if you were an alcoholic or a drug addict, they usually get fixated at the age they start that. So I started to realize, oh, okay, my body's a lot older. I'm basically 23 and clueless. So in 2011, when I got out, at the end of 11 and then into 12, I started realizing, okay, I need to deprogram. So part of that was that I was, in a way, felt younger, if that makes any sense. The relief of leaving Scientology was unbelievable. I can't, and I talk about it in the movie a little bit, how one day I just woke up, which was unusual. So, so then from the deprogramming, I started to go, I lost my train of thought. So,
Well, I was talking about the documentary being a tool, a part
right.
of your process of making amends.
Yeah. So the first thing is I started applying the 8 steps in so many words that an alcoholic does. One of them, all the people that I had been an asshole to some people that I shouldn't have been. Just no reason for it. I was just, Scientology brought out the worst in me, in my opinion. And it did try to turn me into a narcissist. It just didn't, it was a constant push-pull though, because it wasn't natural for me to be a narcissist. So, but I did pretty well as a narcissist. Anyway, I was nasty to people, and I started contacting them. And then a few people who had hung in there when I had hit my 3-year depression, I contacted them first, quietly, and said, they were Scientologists, so I couldn't tell them that I was out, but I could contact them and say, thank you so much for supporting me when I was ill, and I'm feeling better now. I didn't tell them why, and they were thrilled, and so were the people in Scientology. They were happy that I had come out of this massive clinical slump. So eventually I started seeing, how can I do positive things, because I made a mess of things with the band and with certain people who work for me. And then as I deprogrammed more and started to do music again and get back into it, then I eventually hit this point of, what if I could tell my story either through a book or through a film? And so I realized, okay, the best thing I can do, because I'm not a big celebrity, the newspapers aren't going to pick up me saying, hey, I'm out of Scientology, and it's bullshit, I thought, well, a documentary, it could have an impact. And it's a different story than the other documentaries, and it's different than the aftermath. This is personal. It's about our story. It's not exactly about Scientology. It's about 2 brothers, and I call my band members brothers, and my other brothers, how we were just clueless. We joined something that did nothing to help us really spiritually or in our careers. It just took from us.
Let me jump in with a question that just occurred to me. It didn't quite occur to me while I was watching the documentary, but now it just has. These days, like today, if Scientology had its hands on a young, successful band, unless I'm just thinking about this incorrectly, I would think that they would push that band to, they would want to foster and encourage their success, not negatively impact the band by demanding they spend a lot of time on course or in auditing. You guys already had a huge hit. Why did Scientology allow the Scientologist members of that band to essentially break up the band by dedicating too much time to Scientology and disconnecting from band members? Why?
I think one of the most intense policies that Hubbard wrote had to do with, he had to impress upon people the concept that there are evil people that were born evil or somehow morphed quickly into being evil, and they were just purely destructive. And he called those people suppressive persons. When I got in 1968, this was a serious policy that was pushed almost immediately when you got in. They checked. So at the time I got in, we were zealots regarding, we just embraced that concept. And I was like naive. I had never run a group before, and now I'm thrown into, when we started the band, I was 18 and I'd never been the boss of anybody, anything. And then I got a bunch of other, young adults, teenagers almost, who I have to run the band and get them to do what they're supposed to do, right? That's like herding cats. And so I'd had difficulties, and I think I was falling into the leadership role. I was still, though, a victim. I had that victim attitude. Of course, I'm Jewish, so that could cause a little bit of that viewpoint. Anyway, so one of the band members, Larry Norman, and we finally apologized to him in person. He was a quirky guy. What can I tell you? He was, kind of unbalanced in his own creative way, but he was extremely creative and talented. So basically, but he was difficult sometimes. So when I learned about the tone scale, which is the emotional scale, because they show you that right away, and then you go, oh my God, I never thought of that. Every emotion in a human being is on this scale, right? And I had little cartoon characters and everything. Said, I know where he is. I know where he is, right? And I started immediately labeling people. And I labeled Larry because he was difficult, and he was never really open with us. He didn't have to be, but he never was. And he was, chronically had a hypochondriac, and so he was difficult. And we were convinced by the people at the mission, the Santa Clara mission, that these people were really dangerous, really dangerous.
I see.
And so they use that fear tactic, right? I didn't view it as fear. It was there, though. Does that make sense?
Totally. Absolutely.
So we just destroyed our band.
Yeah.
Our two lead singers, we had created this unique kind of a sound and a unique stage performance. We were very entertaining. And then we had to go on tour without Larry, who did the hardest part in our hit song, and we couldn't really do it anymore.
Incredible. Unbelievable. So Geoff, what do you want? What would you like me to ask my viewers to do about this documentary? Do you want me to ask them to watch it at a particular place, to vote on it? How does this work?
The way it works, it is a small window now. If they're willing to, and you do have to log into the website, which I'm never a big fan of. You just log in there. It's a good site and everything. There's a small fee, like $3.99, and you buy a ticket, and then you can watch the film. You have 3 days or something to watch the film.
Okay, so the film festival, the virtual film festival, is behind a paywall?
Yes, it is. I mean, it's not a big paywall, but yes.
That's going to be tough. That's a tough ask on the internet.
I know it is. If they don't want to do that, certainly they can go to our website and see other things. And the other thing they can support, because they go hand in hand, is our band is on Spotify and Apple. And I think people who like rock would like what we do. And that's in the movie, talking about that we brought the band back together after 50 years. And
under the original name?
Under the original name. Unfortunately, Larry had died in 2008, so we couldn't bring him back. We would have. But Gene came back, and Gene was never a Scientologist. And then we offered to have Albert Ribisi be part of the reunion, and he did not reply.
Well, he's still a Scientologist, right?
He's still, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, and so, yeah, that was really, within itself, it was a real event, our reunion of the band. And so we captured that on a lot of film, which is not not in the documentary. And I think that will be its own little documentary of the reunion. But people can go to Spotify and listen. I mean, a lot of that stuff, there's no cost to listening to us.
Well, I'll put all the instructions on how to the website for the film festival, the login information. I'll put that in the description below. I'll also pin it as a top comment, so as many people who want to participate in that can do so.
Yeah, that would really be helpful. I mean, ideally, we would like to be on Netflix or Apple TV.
So is that how these film festivals work? Is if you win a top prize or you get a lot of exposure, you're looking for distribution?
Yeah. And the distributors go to the festivals so in our, this was a good festival. I'm really excited that we got in it. And then the article in the Mercury News that was picked up by a few other news outlets, including MSN, they selected out of the top 10 out of 155 different movies that are in the festival. And that covers documentaries, scripted long-form films, and short films. So I felt really privileged that we got in the top 10.
That's great. So for the film festival to have a positive result, is it based on number of viewers? Are the viewers expected to vote, or I really don't know how these things work.
Yeah, they are all different. But in this case, I think just the number of people who log in and watch the film, and it won't be public after Sunday.
So they have until Sunday to watch this thing.
Yeah, and if not, then the next time they could see it would be in August, unless we get a distributor sooner. And then, of course, we'd love to get it out right away.
What's happening in August?
The live film festival.
Oh, so this is the virtual version. The live festival is in August.
Yes, and
so does that mean, Geoff, that they're not picking a winner until August?
They don't really pick winners. It's an elevated festival. It's not about that. It's about exposing films that they feel are good quality. And so just getting in the festival, you're a winner.
Oh, excellent. It's an honor just to be nominated.
Yeah, I mean, and exactly. It's tougher to get into Tribeca or Sundance. I mean, there's no real nominations there. You just get in and you're like, whoa, okay, I'm in Sundance, right?
I get it. Okay, well, fantastic. I'll put all the instructions in the description.
Great.
And I'll put the instructions in the pinned comments, and hopefully a lot of people head over there and watch this thing. It really was fantastic. I watched it. One of the luxuries of YouTube is you can actually change the playback speed. And I like watching things at like 1.4 speed, 1.5 speed. So, I mean, I burned through this thing, and it was really, I mean it when I say it made me feel ashamed that I did not know more of your story before this point, because it's an incredible, you were so involved in the early days of Scientology, creating the Celebrity Center, even the success that you went on to have artistically, even though personally Scientology seems to have pretty much, wrought its normal destruction. You still had tons of success as an artist. As did your brother. The whole story is incredible. So I encourage people to check it out.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. All right, Geoff. Well, thanks. And hey, if we ever want to come on and do another chat about anything at all, you just let me know. We'll do it anytime.
Well, and also reach out to me for anything I might know, because I was inside of a lot of stuff. I mean, I could tell you stuff. I was a big supporter of CCHR, and that's a whole ball of wax in itself.
We'll definitely have to do story time with Geoff Levin as maybe a weekly thing.
I don't mind.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, if you want to see my rock and roll songs, click right on this guitar. And if you want to see a different one of my videos, then you could click right inside here. If you have subscribed or not, subscribe right here.